going through the internet, and all of a sudden I see Florio's posted this about full-time officials, and does this have anything to do with gambling and the fact that maybe we're going to expand the regular season to 18 games? I go, hey, Fritzy, get Florio on. I need details here. So, Mike, where do you want to start? Regular season or what these full-time officials mean as far as perception, and is it attached to gambling?
Well, I think with the full-time officials, it is fascinating, Dan, because remember, it's been 5 years since the lockout that ended after that Hail Mary game on Monday night, the Packers, Seahawks, the embarrassment that sparked the NFL to finally get a deal done with the officials. Part of that deal from 2012 was the ability to have full-time officials. But it took 5 years to get to the point where they finalized the plan because it's expensive to have full-time employees. But with legalized gambling coming, and one way or the other, there's a sense that it's coming, either through the courts, through Congress, however it happens, it's going to happen. And the NFL understands that they need to enhance the perception that they're doing everything they can to get the calls right. It's one thing to have some goofy call that screws up the point spread and millions of dollars changes hands through illegal gambling. Once that starts happening under the umbrella of legalized gambling, that's when the politicians start sniffing around. That's when people start really criticizing the sport. And the NFL has to be ready to do everything it can to create the sense that we're doing all we can to get these calls right and ultimately eliminating as many mistakes as possible.
But you have, I think, 124 officials in the NFL. 24 are going to be full-time officials. How does that work in the hierarchy of, if you're a full-time official, are you getting better games? What do you do as a full-time official that maybe Ed Hockley is not doing in the offseason? Help me out with the gray area here.
Yeah, and there is a lot of gray there. There is a lot of looseness in this where there isn't going to be some mandatory assignment of Ed Hockley, hey, you're going to be full-time. They're going to take volunteers. They're going to let guys have other employment as long as they recognize that the NFL is their full-time employer. I mean, I think they're trying to do this in a way where it's baby steps, it's experimentation, it's perception, and ultimately you're still going to have the vast majority of the workforce that isn't full-time. Now, does it continue to move toward full-time? Maybe it will, especially when you consider, yes, it's expensive to have these folks as full-time employees, but if the NFL plays this legalized gambling card the right way, they are going to make not just millions more per year, they're going to make billions more per year. They're going to be able to afford full-time officials across the board. But for now, it's just going to be some. There's going to be a limit to how many per any given crew are full-time. They'll be primarily utilized between the end of the season and May 15. And, again, I think any effort, any focus that the part-time officials give on top of what they're already providing to the league is a good thing. It's not going to iron out all the mistakes, but it does enhance the perception that the NFL is trying to get all the calls right.
But what's the downside to this? As I look at, if let's say a part-time official makes a mistake, or God forbid a full-time official makes a mistake, and are we going to be alerted to who is a full-time and who is a part-time official?
Oh, I have a feeling that information will ultimately be available. And won't that be part of the analysis when there's a blunder and that person's name gets thrown out there? Remember, there were those series of mistakes, whether it was clock management, whether it was the bad call at the back of the end zone where the Seahawks player hit the ball out of bounds and the official looking right at it didn't realize that should have been flagged. These are all things that the first question is going to be, is that a full-timer? Or is that a part-timer? And that's the danger of dipping your toe in this water. Eventually, you got to do a cannonball into it. And I think that's why we're heading in that direction. They're laying the foundation now with a limited number of officials so that once gambling is legal, we won't have that distinction. I think they're going to be willing to tolerate the distinction for now, but by the time there is legalized gambling, and it may be a 20-year proposition, it's still coming. And by the time it happens, that's when you're going to have all of them full-time employees.
This was also posted on Pro Football Talk by Mike Florio joining us. Roger Goodell's recent comments regarding the preseason serve as a clear reminder that the league still wants to swap fewer preseason games for more regular season games. What's the big hurdle here?
Well, the big hurdle is getting the players to buy into it without the league being public in its effort to try to persuade people that there should be more regular season games. It used to be when Roger Goodell would trash the preseason, the obvious follow was, well, we have 20 total games. Let's have fewer preseason games and more regular season games. But at some point, the league recognized it's kind of hard to reconcile player health and safety with wanting more regular season games. So they need the players to come to the bargaining table the next time they negotiate their labor deal, and they need the players to be the ones who say, we're ready to play more games in the regular season. We're ready to come up with a plan to make it happen. It has to come from the players. But when the commissioner says anything about the preseason, that's the deeper message is they want to expand the regular season because, Dan, they have the power right now if they wanted to. The league does to cut the preseason. But they're not going to take away preseason games and go from 20 total games to 19 or 18. They want to replace a preseason game with a regular season game. And he specifically mentioned 3, which I think the math is simple. 3 preseason, 17 regular season, 8 home games, 8 road games, 1 neutral site game. In the past, that's been dismissed, but maybe that's the end result here, and that's the middle ground between 16 and 18.
But revenue comes into play here, and usually that placates the players. It's you get an extra game check. Is that what we're looking at here?
Well, it's an extra game check. It's a bigger pie. And also, I think part of this would have to be bigger rosters. I think that's how you get the players to buy in. Because as we hear more and more about the long-term health effects of playing football, you start adding regular season games, you're adding more opportunities to go out there, get injured, get head trauma, get things that will be problematic for you later in life. So it's really going to have to be a package of benefits beyond that extra game check that make the players believe, hey, you know what, this is a good idea for us to do this. But again, it can't come from the league. It has to be the league hoping, or at least working the back channels to get the union to be the one that says, we think this works, we're behind it. Because if the league is behind it, I think that across the board, people are going to stand up and reject it.
One other item here, and I had somebody who's working with the company who's trying to develop a new helmet. I think you were talking about the Seattle Seahawks, who have been sort of at the forefront of this. Give us an idea what this helmet is all about and how is it going to change the sport?
Yeah, I mean, we're going to see this Vices helmet a lot this year. Doug Baldwin, Richard Sherman, others using it. It's got kind of a cushy exterior shell. Now, look, no helmet is going to eliminate concussions because a lot of concussions happen when the body is moving at a certain rate of speed and all of a sudden the body stops and the brain bounces off the inside of the skull. But to the extent that they're taking advantage of technologies to try to come up with a helmet that can reduce the number of head injuries you get from getting hit with a helmet, then that is part of this broader process to make the game as safe as possible. It's never going to be completely safe. But, and look, the league gets criticized a lot. But think back to the way football was 20 years ago and look at how it is now. There have been a lot of advances in the past 10 years to make the game safer, and it shows. And one way to make the game safer is to come up with a better helmet, even though you have to acknowledge there's no way you're going to get rid of all concussions because of the fact that it is a matter of the brain hitting the inside of the skull.
Thank you, Mike. I appreciate it, as always.
All right, Ty. Hey, we got 4 weeks until we get started.
Yep, we're gonna be up there with Bill Belichick. Will Belichick acknowledge you and me?
Oh, hell no.
Okay,
me or you? Hell no.
Okay, I didn't think so. I didn't think so because what happens is Rodney and Tony and I will be standing together on the football field, and then Belichick walks by and gives Rodney a big hug, and then he'll shake Tony's hand, and then I'm the third guy, so then I have to quickly act like I'm doing something else, like looking at my notes, so it's not that awkward as Belichick walks by and grumbles something under his breath. So maybe I'll turn to you and we'll just talk to one another.
Hey, the best one was last December at MetLife Stadium on a Saturday night when Ndamukong Suh came over to say hi to Tony.
Yeah.
And he gave Rodney a look that I wish I would have had my phone going at the time. It was great.
And you know what? Rodney's not afraid of anybody.
No. I wish I would have been close enough that I could have tried to agitate a little bit.
Oh, good stuff. Thank you, Mike.
All right, see you, buddy.
ProFootballTalk.com.
The Dan Patrick Show, weekday mornings on Audience.